1 to 5. My son, keep my words and treasure my commandments within you. Keep my commandments and live, and my teaching is the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding your intimate friend, that they may keep you from an adulteress, from the foreigner who flatters with her words.
Thank you so much for being here. It is a privilege to have the opportunity to speak the gospel unto you here this morning. I hope that the things I say here will be encouraging and edifying to you. It's great to have visitors with us, and thank you so much for coming our way, and we hope you'll come back again. And I hope you'll be encouraged and edified by the things that I say here as we continue with the study in our book of Proverbs, and Proverbs chapter 7 in particular. This past week, I ran across this advice that an individual, if he was looking for, or she's looking for a perfect mate, he needs to find one that is committed to their football team through good and bad, because if he's willing to go through good and bad with his football team, then he'll be able to go good and bad with the things that will be involved with his wife. And we think about that all the time, about what kind of advice can we give when it comes to husbands and wives. What kind of advice can we get when it comes to forgiveness? What kind of advice do we get when it comes to finding someone in our lives? And there's just a variety of things that we can find in the book of Proverbs that we can cling on to and use as a guide for us to do the everyday things in our life. And one of the things that he kind of emphasizes here in this particular chapter in Proverbs chapter 7 is temptation. And it is this advice, once again, as a father to a son, to a child, and he's telling you, do not go down this path. And he brings up a story, or maybe something that he has observed in his life, and he talks about the things that he has picked up on this particular moment. And what I want us to look at here is maybe some of the questions we need to ask ourselves when it comes to temptation, and what will temptation really do to us if we're not careful? And one of the questions I think we need to ask ourselves when it comes to temptation is, do we know better? Do I know better to do certain things in our life, even though I have found the evidence that says I shouldn't do this, but I go ahead and do it anyways? And we usually follow that question, or follow that idea with a question: what are you thinking when you do something that you know is adamantly wrong, but you do it anyways? And there's this kind of perception that we see with this individual here in Proverbs chapter 7, verse 7. And there's different translations on this one statement, because he sees, I've seen among the simple, I have perceived among the youths a young man lacking sense. And I told you in our Bible study, some translations use the word simpleton, or it shows the word ignorant. And the thing I want us to get out of this one particular passage is this guy is not really all that dumb. But the thing I also want you to understand too, he's not all that bright either. He is a young man that thinks he may know it all, but he doesn't. He's a young man that may not look stupid, but he does do stupid things. And he will go into this scenario where he is going to do something very dumb. And the thing I find interesting, this whole book, I think me and Carter talked about when we hung out over the weekend. I said I could use just this chapter. I would have not any insight on it. I could not tell you anything on it. I could just read it verse for verse, and you should come to a conclusion without me saying a word. How dangerous temptation is, how dangerous it is to fall in that temptation, and what is the sad consequences behind temptation. You don't need my insight for it. You don't need my I think so's for it. The scripture itself gives us enough information, knowledge, and wisdom and understanding to know that this is a bad scenario that we need to stay away from. But I want to go to verse 26, if you will. Because we see at this young man that it talks about there at the end. It says, many a victim has she laid low, and all her slain are a mighty throng. We understand between that verse in 7 and that verse in 26, something is going to happen and something is not good. And it is not only known to the observer what this individual that we're going to talk about is like, but it is also something that is known to this young man lacking sense. He knows that she has done this before. He knows that she has done things that is not right. But nonetheless, as we'll see here in a little bit, he will still go her way to find her. He is not this individual that's like, well, I didn't know she was going to be there. He's not that individual that's like, well, I don't know what she's like. He knows. And still, with all the warning signs that have come up and all the red flags, he still goes. He still looks for her. What are we thinking when we have this kind of mentality? We know that something's wrong, and we find every reason why we should still do it, even though the scripture will tell us not to. Why do people still gossip and know they're not supposed to gossip? Why do people still steal and still steal? Why do people do these things that they do? And it's because this wisdom that we have been given, this knowledge we have been given, we don't put the proper understanding in it. Remember, I told you a couple years ago, there was an individual that they thought that their relationship, their marriage, was an adulterous relationship. And he asked the preacher at the time, he says, what do you think about our situation? And all he did was he went to the scriptures when it concerns divorce. And he read it to him. He didn't give his input. He didn't give his insight. He didn't give his I think so's. He just read it to him. He says, what do you think? She was very upset because she knows that she is in a wrong relationship. He tried to say, well, I don't think that's right. I think you do. Remember, let's not lean to our own understanding here. Let's go to the precepts and the promises and the wisdom and the knowledge that God gives us and try to understand the things that he has given us. Do we know better when it comes to temptation? When temptation is sitting in our face, do we know better to stay away from it? That's my next point. Will I avoid it? Look there in chapter 7, verses 8 and 9. And you see that he went passing along the street near her corner, taking the road to her house in the twilight, in the evening, at the time of night and darkness. He knows where she lives. He knows where she likes to go. We'll find out that she's an individual that doesn't like to stay at her own home, but he knows that she likes to go to certain places. She knows that she likes to go on certain streets and certain corners. He knows what she's like. And you know what she's capable of doing. He may not be looking for trouble, but he's not trying to avoid it either. Sometimes we hear the arguments of individuals that will go into certain areas and try to say that, well, I'll be right in a den of thieves or a den of wolves. I'll be okay, and we're not okay. Because it opens up a Pandora's box of trouble. If you continue on there in verses 10 and 11. It says, behold, that woman meets him dressed as a prostitute, willy of heart, and she is loud and wayward, and her feet do not stay at home. The observer notices this, and the young man knows that she is not to stick around for chit-chat. Whatever your standard in modesty is, you have a standard, but you understand without any doubt in your mind when he says, as he looks down through his window to this particular woman, she is dressed for a reason. And it's not something that is going to be okay to do. And her attitude is something that is appealing as well, even though she's loud. And I look at it as being loud and obnoxious. I look at it as an individual that does not want to stay at home because there's nothing to do at home. So she goes somewhere. She goes somewhere in the night because there's nothing to do, and she's going to find something to do. And she's going to find something to do with someone because she is bored. And she is an individual that has not, this is not the first time she has done this. This won't be the last time she does this. And he's allured by this. When he sees her, she knows that she has intentions of doing something. When he hears her, he knows that she has intentions to do something. And not only does this young man notices this, observes this, and understands this, but this young man, that he may be dumb, but he's not dumb enough to know what her initiative is. And he does nothing to try to avoid this scenario. Ask yourself, brethren, the next time you're in a situation that something is going to try to cause you trouble, why stay around it? Remember, it's nice to have these monitors now because there used to be the infamous line up here. Remember when I first started preaching here, and not only I've used it, but Peyton would use it because that line right there, and we talk about the good and the evil on each side there, and instead of trying to stay far away from evil as possible, we tried to get on the line. And get as close to evil as we can. John Underwood would say, if it looked like a duck and it walked like a duck and it quacked like a duck, then it's a duck. Well, if it looks like sin and acts like sin and it has all the dressings of sin, why would you want any business to be around it? Avoid the sin. And ask yourself, how will this appeal to me? I think we got this mentality when sin is something that we need to stay away from. It's going to be something ugly, obscene, disgusting, to a point where we don't want nothing to do with it. And the thing is that sin does not package itself as something grotesque. Sin packages itself pretty, appealing. No, you may not ever get near a cigarette, but maybe you have a hard time staying away from gossip. And maybe you never had a drug problem, but you have a hard time having an issue with backbiting. He's not going to try to lure you with things that it's pretty obvious that you're not going to get near. He's going to let you go after things that appeal to you. I think there in Proverbs chapter 7, verses 13, and we can go on to verse 17. It says, she seizes him and kisses him, and with a bold face she says to him, she tempts him not only by appearance, but now she's going to do it with action. Imagine if you were a good-looking guy or a pretty girl will come up to you and kiss you. You will be flattered. I have no doubt in my mind you'd be flattered. Because somebody is giving you attention that maybe on your standard is way better looking, and you don't have a problem getting that attention from someone that is that appealing to you. But everything she is doing wrong, she's going to portray herself just the opposite. Because the next thing she says is, I had to offer sacrifices, and today I've paid my vows. The thing is, brethren, with that bold face, she is telling this guy that she is a good girl. I've offered sacrifices. That means that she went and she offered sacrifice, probably a peace offering. And she gave some to the priest, but she took some home for herself. And she's going to share that peace offering with someone. Even though she's dressed like a prostitute, even though she's loud, even though she is doing everything that would give a red flag that she is bad, the first thing comes out of her mouth is like, no, 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 I'm good. And that's how we really like to justify our wrongdoing. Because in order for us to justify our wrongdoing, the first statement we'll make is this: I'm a good person. And brethren, it doesn't matter if you're young or old. It doesn't matter if you're a husband or a wife. It doesn't matter if you're dating or you're even looking. Whatever the scenario may be, if an individual has to come to you and says, I'm a good person, and then is followed by doing something wrong, run away. Avoid it. Because it is telling you that it's nothing but trouble. If they have to make a confirmation that they're a good person, they must not be a good person. Because you haven't seen anything else that would tell you that they're a good person. And that's what she's doing. He knows what she's like. But yet this statement that she makes is trying to compel him, no, you got me wrong. But all the evidence has shown us so far, she is not, or he's not wrong. She is bad news. And then she comes in verse 15 and says, I have come out to meet you and to seek you eagerly, and I have found you. I'm not looking for anybody else. I'm looking for you. Well, that made me feel special as well. You know, as an official, I got to be careful when someone gives me a compliment, because it just sounds like it's just asking for trouble. And it's because sometimes we like to hear how pretty we are. We like to hear how good we are. We like to hear how important we are. We like to hear how special we are. And there are some individuals out in this world that have no business being around us. But because of the things that they say to us is why we still cling to them. No action, just statements. And when someone would say that to me, yeah, that would be something pretty enticing. She's just looking just for me. But she's not. I'm just convenient. Because I know she's out and about. She's looking for someone. I'm hoping she finds me. Remember, our guy's not dumb. He just doesn't know what he's thinking. Then it continues on and says, I have spread my couch with coverings, colored linens from Egyptian linen. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh and aloes and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love till the morning. Let us delight ourselves with love. Remember what I said there in our Bible study? If you just use these passages just by themselves, it sounds pretty romantic. Till the next verse. It's not love. She calls it love, but it's really adultery. She calls it something that every person needs, but it's something that every person needs to get rid of. I don't know about some of you guys that are a little bit older, but when I was growing up out Wick, there was only 2 channels. There was WTRF in Wheeling, and there was WTAP in Clarksburg. I think that's right. Maybe it was WTOV. There's a point behind this, people. There was only 2 or 3 channels at the time when we were growing up. And when I was growing up out at Wick, in the desolation of Wick, there was only one thing that you could watch in the afternoon. Anybody guess what it is? What's that, Donna? American Bandstand. No, not American Bandstand. It was soap operas. And I remember 2 in particular because my mom watched them all the time. The Young and the Restless and The Bold and the Beautiful. I think there was another one in there, but I can't remember what it was. But just in the title itself, what does it tell you? That the things they're going to talk about is only for the young and the restless. The things they're going to talk about is only for the bold and the beautiful. And I can remember watching these 7 or 8 years with my mom while she at work or during our summers. That's the things that we watched in the afternoon. And the story is all the same. Why in the world is that girl with that guy if she loves this guy? And why is that guy with that girl if he loves this girl? And the relationships changed every year. And the only ones that really stayed in a solid relationship as husband and wife was really the patriarch or the matriarch of the family. All the other ones, infidelity. But the thing is that's the way we display this. We try to display adultery as appealing. We try to display sexual immorality as something that everybody does. We tell fornication is just human nature. We just emphasize this kind of sexual realm in this day and age, and we try to say that it's really natural, but all the while, we understand that there is damage and repercussions that come along with this. And any sexual relationship outside of marriage, you cannot convince me that there is a relationship that is okay. And the thing is we neglected all the desires such as adultery and fornication and sex outside of marriage, and we made that so passive that when it comes to kind of the major sexual immorality situations in this day and age, we say, no, we can't do that. Well, why not? You said it was okay with all these other things. It's not a shock to many of us that we just have a demand to do more and more outrageous stuff. But that's the appeal, though. Everything is supposed to be made beautiful. Everything is supposed to be made appealing. And all the time, brethren, it's wrong. Ask yourself. Another thing that we ask ourselves when it comes to temptation, can we get away with it? Because remember in our verse 9 in chapter 7, all this is happening at dark. And usually when it comes to the time of nights and darkness, it is a scenario where nobody is not really doing anything but other than going to bed. But we see now that in this scenario, not everybody is asleep and not everybody is at home. And not only that this individual is doing this with the perception of no one knowing that they're out here, she also reminds him about the individual that she should be committed to. And says that he is gone. He's on a long journey, and he took a bag of money with him, and at the full moon he will come home. And some Bible historians say this would be about a couple weeks. He's going to be gone for a while. There's no way he's going to catch us because he's far away from home. He's going to be there for quite some time, and nobody knows we're together right now, with the exception of the observer. And some Bible scholars suggest that this is God looking down on someone that thinks that the only one that knows what's going on is this young man and this woman. But somebody has seen this. Just like we look at Exodus chapter 2, verse 14, for example. Remember Moses thought when he killed the Egyptian, nobody saw him do that either. Until he saw a fight with his own brethren. He says, you got to stop doing this. He says, who made you judge? Are you going to kill me like you did that Egyptian? That's why he left. Because he says, somebody knows about this. It's that look to the right and look to the left and thinking, nobody doesn't see what I'm doing. and I'm going to get away with it. Moses didn't get away with it. Really, neither will these individuals. Because keep in mind here, remember our one verse there in 26 where it says, she has done this before. If she has done this before, how do you know she's done this before? How do you know as the observer, when you look down across this city out your window, you see this individual and you say, I know exactly what she's doing. And when that guy is coming, you know exactly what he's doing. And if they get together, you know bad things are going to happen. Do you really think that if you're going to commit this kind of sin, that it's going to be kept under wraps? Sooner or later, the truth comes out. Nobody hides anything forever. Thomas Jefferson, we found out, 200 years later, they had mistresses that were his slaves. And you may not have told anybody about your sin, but there is, I guarantee, one individual that does know you have done something. God. Just because the scenario looks so appealing that you think you can get away with it, he will not get away with it. And she won't either. The last question I'd ask you, what's going to be the result? Proverbs chapter 7, verse 20 through 23. She has done anything in a visual perspective to appeal to him. She has done everything in action to appeal to him. She has done everything with flattering words to appeal to him. And with that smooth talk, she compels him. And all once he follows her as an ox that goes to slaughter, or a stag that is caught fast, till an arrow pierces its liver, as a bird that rushes into a snare. He does not know that it will cost him his life. When I was younger, we would butcher cattle. And I want you to get this kind of mindset. Do you really think that ox, when he goes to slaughter, that it's going to be his last minutes, hours of his life? He doesn't know that his life is going to take him, or he's going to lose his life in just a matter of moments. Think about this too, because we all get aggravated about it. Driving home, and for one reason or another, a deer jumps out in front of you, and you plow it. Do you really think that he has the attention, like, I'm going to get that guy or get that gal that's driving that car? Do you think anything that ever gets caught in a trap knows that it's a trap, but goes into it anyways? This is very dark stuff here. Something that he looks at as love. Something that she looks at as a moment of gratification. They do not realize, or he does not realize in particular, that there's consequences for this. Keep in mind, he gives this advice. After he tells this story about this individual that has been led by this woman, as he observes these things happening, he says, listen to me and be attentive to the words of my mouth. Let not your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. For many a victim has she laid low, and all her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is the way to Sheol, and going down to the chambers of death. he would know. He would know the consequences of adultery. Who's the author? Solomon. Who's his mom and dad? David, Bathsheba. Now take this in a perspective of a child talking to his parents. Because it's happened to us. Dad, how did you and mom meet? Mom, did you have any other husbands before you met Dad? Or you have any other boyfriends before you met Dad? Do I have brothers and sisters? The reason why he says death is imminent is because death became imminent for his family, for his father's adulterous relationship. Remember, somebody died. Actually, 2 people died. Her husband, that he put on the front line so he would be killed. And then because of the consequence of his sin, that child that she bore to David died as well. He would know. This is why he makes a suggestion. When you see this kind of scenario, there's nothing good that could come out of this. And may I encourage you here today? Like we see David go out onto the roof, and then his next action is sin. Solomon, when he goes to look out his window, he advises his son, don't follow the path. And if we look at how Solomon is giving advice to his son to keep him safe, to keep him from danger, to help him have a long, happy, prosperous life, we see that God does the same thing for you and I. Go to Galatians chapter 4. When Galatians chapter 4, he talks about how that heir, as long as he is a child, is no different from a slave, though he is an owner of everything. He's not giving advice here. He's giving instruction now. He says, but with the fullness of time, or in the same way we also, when we were children, we were enslaved to the elementary principles of the world. We were simple individuals as well. But now, when we went to the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law, and we are redeemed to those who are under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. Here is now we go from a father that gives advice to a son not to sin. You see a father through his son give us advice not to sin. But I wouldn't call it advice. I'd encourage you to look at it as instruction. We have an opportunity to do something about it here this morning. And as Christ has made this sacrifice, we ask ourselves, what can we do to be pleasing unto him? What can we understand from the instruction and wisdom that has been given to us to understand what we need to do in those next steps? It's something as simple as Acts chapter 2, verse 38. Repent and be baptized, every one of you, for the remission of sins, and you shall receive the gift of the Holy Spirit, you and your family. We have that opportunity to do that here this morning. We also have the opportunity to repent of sins. And look how Jesus reminds us, as we talked in our study, how important it is to make this change to be pleasing unto God. No longer to take simple instruction, but take the understanding that we need to transform. Maybe one of us need to pray about something this morning. Everybody is dealing with challenges. We have a list of individuals that we talk about in the mornings, about their travels, about their illnesses, about whatever the case may be, their struggles that they're dealing with. And we all understand that we're dealing with struggles. Don't be afraid to ask for prayer. And let's help out any opportunity that we can to help individuals. And if prayer is something that we find necessary to do, let's do it. While we have the opportunity, while we have the time that is right now, won't you come while we stand and while we sing?